Imagine for a moment you're interacting with someone who appears, well, utterly normal. Maybe a neighbor, a public figure, perhaps even someone you see on the local news making a really earnest appeal.
Mm-hmm.
Yet beneath that carefully constructed facade, they harbor the darkest, most heinous secrets. They've committed acts so unspeakable they just defy human comprehension.
It's a chilling thought.
Right. What if the person pleading for their missing loved one on television is, in fact, the very architect of their disappearance?
Mm.
That chilling reality, the profound and disturbing phenomenon of murderers who operate brazenly in plain sight, even stepping into the public eye to feign innocence and grief. That's exactly what we're plunging into today.
And it's more than just, a macabre curiosity, isn't it? This isn't merely about the act of murder itself.
Right.
It's about the profound psychological contortion, the almost unbelievable level of deception required to convincingly feign the very emotions that a normal, empathetic person would genuinely feel in such a terrible, heart-wrenching situation. These individuals manage to navigate intense public scrutiny, often under bright lights and cameras, all while harboring the horrific, unspeakable truth. It's a chilling insight into a complete absence of conscience.
Absolutely. And our mission with this deep dive is to pull back the curtain on this chilling psychology, to not only grasp how such monstrous deception can thrive within our communities, but also to meticulously examine the systemic failures and challenging societal backdrops that so often and so tragically accompany these cases.
Mm-hmm.
We're here to extract crucial, impactful insights into where our systems fall woefully short, with a laser focus today on one of the most heartbreaking and impactful cases to emerge from Australia, a case that stands as a stark, infuriating testament to both individual depravity and collective oversight.
The sources for today's deep dive are particularly compelling and, in some instances, profoundly unsettling. We'll be drawing from a detailed analysis of convicted murderers who publicly deceived, examining a pattern of behavior that is both eerily consistent and, frankly, deeply revealing about the human capacity for cruelty. And perhaps most importantly for our conversation today, we'll delve into an in-depth report on a specific socioeconomically disadvantaged area in Australia, Mount Druitt. This community, tragically, became the backdrop for the background elements of the case that truly encapsulates these harrowing themes. The Kiesha Whitepart tragedy. It's a story that just screams about accountability, both individual and collective, and the urgent need for a deeper understanding of vulnerabilities.
Let's begin by unpacking this truly unsettling phenomenon. Convicted murderers who, with astonishing audacity, willingly step into the media spotlight, granting television interviews before their arrest.
Yeah, it's hard to fathom.
The sheer, unfathomable cold-bloodedness it takes to do this, to sit there under public scrutiny and fabricate such raw emotion, is truly sickening. They don't just mimic, they perform, feigning the kind of genuine grief or confusion that any person would experience if they were victims of crime or if their loved one had truly vanished.
Yeah.
It offers us this profoundly disturbing yet critical window into their utterly warped minds.
And what's deeply fascinating and disturbing here is not just their comfort with this charade, but their mastery of it. This isn't just, a fleeting moment of panic or a quick lie.
No, it's sustained.
It's often a sustained, calculated performance. It's meticulously crafted to manipulate public perception, to redirect suspicion, and to steer investigations far, far away from them. This chilling ability to maintain composure under immense, unimaginable pressure, all while carrying such a monstrous, horrific secret, speaks volumes about a profound, almost pathological lack of empathy and a terrifying capacity for instrumentalizing human emotion for their own perverse ends. It truly underscores how detached they are from the reality of their actions.
Consider the case of Stephen McDaniel, a Mercer Law School graduate, of all things.
Right. The irony there is just, wow.
In June 2011, he was interviewed on camera about the disappearance of his neighbor, Lauren Giddings. The initial footage, it shows him calmly offering various seemingly rational explanations for what might have happened to his friend.
Playing the concerned neighbor.
Exactly. Then about a minute into the interview, the reporter drops a bombshell. Police have found a body. And what does McDaniel do? He breaks away from the interview, seemingly overwhelmed, sits on the grass, clutches his head as if to collect his thoughts. At the time, observers might have thought, oh, that's spontaneous grief. But in hindsight, knowing the truth,
It's raw panic.
it's pure panic, distress, the realization that his whole constructed life was about to just unravel.
Yeah.
Just hours later, police searched his room. He was behaving erratically, sweating profusely, drinking like 10 bottles of water. All signs of extreme internal turmoil.
The facade crumbling in real time.
Totally. Investigators eventually uncovered the irrefutable evidence, and 10 months later he confessed to strangling and dismembering Lauren. The sheer, calculated performance, the chilling manipulation of human emotion, it truly makes your skin crawl.
His behavior, though seemingly emotional on the surface, was, like you said, a clear indicator of extreme stress under direct scrutiny, not genuine sorrow. It's a recurring telltale sign, isn't it? That their emotional responses are often performative rather than authentically felt.
Exactly.
Then we have Matthew Haverly, interviewed in June 2018 after a body was found in a nearby creek. He calmly, even casually, speculated about what might have happened to the victim. He even went so far as to feign concern for his own mother, asking how concerned she would be about the situation.
Oh, God. The chilling irony.
Right. The victim turned out to be his very own mother, who had died of blunt force trauma to the head before being dumped in that creek. He claimed to remember nothing, pleaded no contest. This level of detached callousness, even while discussing his victim, it's truly horrifying.
The depths of this depravity are just. They're unfathomable. It's one thing to commit such an abhorrent crime, but to then use your victim's memory or even their physical presence as a prop for your lies to orchestrate such a public farce. It's beyond sickening. Gerard Baden Clay in Queensland, Australia, provides another absolutely appalling example.
Yeah, that one was huge in Australia.
3 agonizing days after he had brutally murdered his wife, Allison, and callously dumped her body on a creek bank in Brisbane, he stood before news cameras in April 2012, making this tearful, desperate plea for her safe return.
Knowing full well what he'd done.
Exactly. It would take another week for authorities to find her remains. His motives were subsequently revealed to be as cold and calculating as his actions. Financial gain through insurance payouts and the desire to be with a mistress.
So premeditated.
Absolutely. This was no crime of passion. It was a premeditated, calculated act, followed by a truly grotesque public display designed to deceive everyone.
And this pattern, as we've been saying, it isn't an isolated anomaly. It tragically recurs. Chris Watts, his case captivated and horrified the world.
It really did.
He made those tearful public appeals for his missing pregnant wife, Shannon, and their 2 young daughters. It was later revealed, to the shock and revulsion of millions, that he had brutally murdered all 3 of them.
All because of an affair.
Yeah. His calm, almost eerily detached pleas, knowing the unspeakable acts he had committed, were truly disturbing to witness. It reveals a capacity for compartmentalization that is just difficult for a normal mind to grasp.
And let's not forget the Archers, Margaret and Neil Archer, that mother and son duo from South Australia.
Oh, right. The ones described as, well, less than brilliant criminals.
To put it mildly, yes. The sources were quite blunt, calling them morons. They repeatedly made television pleas for the safe return of Neil's girlfriend, Jody Myers.
All the while,
they had already murdered her and callously buried her body under a concrete floor in their shed. Their utterly foolish errors, like brazenly using Jody's credit cards and cell phone long after her death, are precisely what ultimately exposed their grotesque and frankly pathetic deception.
It beggars belief sometimes, the stupidity alongside the cruelty.
It really does. And Mark Evans, who murdered his stepdaughter Zoe. He faced interviews where body language experts later pinpointed clear signs of his deception, even as he was denying any involvement.
And Zoe's death was particularly brutal, wasn't it?
Horrific. Asphyxiation, punched, then dumped in a badger den. The sheer layers of their lies, the callousness of their public performances, they're just as horrifying as the crimes themselves. It's a testament to how evil can wear the mask of normalcy.
And the chilling reality is that these individuals aren't just one-off actors. Some are truly masters of leading double lives, weaving their horrific truths into the fabric of everyday existence. Take Dennis Rader, the infamous BTK killer.
Oh yeah, BTK.
This man, who was a respected church leader and a local dog catcher, was actually interviewed on local news in 1991 about animal attacks.
No way.
Yes. The news team, and indeed his entire community, had absolutely no idea they were speaking to a serial killer responsible for at least 10 murders over 3 decades in Kansas.
That's terrifying.
Rader expertly used his position as a compliance officer, carrying a badge and a gun, to satisfy his twisted need for control, feeling this perverse sense of invulnerability credibility as he sent taunting letters to authorities and media outlets.
The arrogance.
Unbelievable arrogance. He was finally undone by something as mundane as metadata embedded on a floppy disk he sent to a news station years later.
Metadata. After 3 decades of terror, that's what caught him. It speaks to the absolute hubris of these individuals, doesn't it?
It really does.
And then there's Ian Huntley, a name that still sends shivers down spines across the UK.
Oh, definitely. The Soham murders.
He was the caretaker at the local school in Soham, and chillingly, the last known person to see 10-year-old Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman alive before they vanished in August 2002. Just days after their disappearance, journalists reconstructing the girls' last known movements stopped at his house. Huntley, with his unnerving calm, explained a fictional account of what he saw, displaying a man who was utterly comfortable with deception, even under direct questioning.
Just days before his arrest.
Exactly. Days later, he was arrested for their brutal murders. And the system, in Huntley's case, offered a different kind of, what's called feedback in custody. While Robert Smith's time in prison has been, as we'll discuss, remarkably smooth, Huntley is reported to have had a very rough time at the hands of other inmates. This contrast, it really raises unsettling questions about how justice is served or not in different contexts.
That's a really important point. And this disturbing pattern of public deception, this chilling ability to live a double life and manipulate public perception, it isn't just some true crime curiosity.
No, it's critical here.
It becomes a critical, horrifying, and deeply infuriating element in the Kiesha Whitepart case. The perpetrators in that tragedy demonstrated this exact same sickening capacity for outward normalcy, for performing false grief, all while hiding unimaginable cruelty and the most profound betrayal of trust imaginable.
And now, we plunge into the unimaginable. The case of 6-year-old Kiesha Whitepart, a child tragically lost to an abyss of deception and unimaginable parental neglect in Mount Druitt. This is where the sheer, unadulterated revulsion at the parents' actions truly boils over.
It's incredibly difficult subject matter.
It is. The sources describe Kristi Abrahams, Kiesha's own mother, killing her daughter in July 2010 because Kiesha refused to put on her pajamas.
Just because of pajamas.
Yes. Kristi hit Kiesha, knocking her unconscious.
Just thinking about that, the triviality of the trigger and the catastrophic, brutal outcome, it makes your blood run cold. It is a level of maternal betrayal that is truly abhorrent.
And the horror, unfortunately, doesn't end there. After striking her own child with such force, Kristi and her partner Robert Smith, instead of seeking urgent medical attention.
Which any normal person would do.
Any normal person, yes. They took Kiesha's unresponsive body and placed her in a cold shower. A desperate and utterly barbaric attempt to revive her through some twisted, unscientific notion.
It's medieval. When that failed, they made the utterly reprehensible decision to put her, still unconscious, to bed, clinging to some deluded hope that she would miraculously wake up. She died overnight.
Oh my God.
It stands as a complete...
The cold calculation, the utter lack of remorse. It's absolutely repulsive. These were conscious, deliberate choices made by 2 individuals who showed no regard for the innocent child they had destroyed.
The final indignity, as detailed in the sources, is truly depraved and speaks to the complete moral vacuum these individuals inhabited. Smith dug a shallow grave for the child.
A shallow grave.
He then poured petrol over Kiesha's body and set it alight. He burned the suitcase a short distance away, meticulously destroying other evidence: clothes, shoes, mobile phone SIM cards. Every action they took was a deliberate, calculated attempt to erase any trace of Kiesha's existence and, more importantly, to conceal their heinous crime.
It wasn't just a cover-up.
No, it was a brutal, determined annihilation of a child's memory and their own monstrous guilt.
And while all this monstrous depravity was unfolding, while Kiesha's body was being burned and buried in secret, Kristi Abrahams and Robert Smith maintained a grotesque charade for 8 long, agonizing months.
8 months. It's unbelievable.
8 months of absolute, sickening, and infuriating lies. They falsely reported Kiesha missing weeks after her death, on August 1st, 2010, initiating a public search for a child they knew was already dead and buried.
You can only begin to imagine the public outpouring of sympathy that followed. Kristi, demonstrating her chilling capacity for manipulation, made a frantic, tearful call to 000, Australia's emergency services number, claiming she woke up to find the front door open and Kiesha gone.
The audacity.
Then they engaged in highly emotional public appeals for Kiesha's safe return, sparking widespread searches across Sydney's western suburbs, involving countless volunteers and resources. All of this while they knew full well her tiny body had been burned and buried. The sheer audacity of these individuals parading their false grief, exploiting public compassion, is truly infuriating and utterly contemptible.
It really highlights the disturbing truth that monsters can walk among us, masked by a veneer of normalcy. But thankfully, their grotesque charade, their sickening web of lies, couldn't last forever. The police, led by respected homicide investigator Russell Oxford, were utterly relentless in their pursuit of the truth, sensing something profoundly wrong.
They knew something wasn't right.
They launched a meticulous 9-month undercover investigation. Imagine the dedication, the sheer patience required to peel back those layers of calculated deceit, slowly, painstakingly building their case.
Undercover work like that takes incredible skill and persistence.
It really does. This involves secret recordings and surveillance, a true testament to their commitment to justice for Kiesha.
And that persistence, that unwavering commitment, paid off in the most chilling and damning way possible. Kristi Abrahams, under the guise of befriending an undercover police officer, eventually confessed.
What did she say?
She admitted she nudged Kiesha with her foot because the child refused to put on her pajamas, causing her to fall and hit her head, knocking her unconscious. This nudge, as she so callously described it.
A nudge that killed her daughter.
That was the fatal blow that ultimately led to the death of her own daughter. It's an infuriating, gut-wrenching confession that exposes the true, cold-hearted evil at play. The flippancy of her description of the act, given the outcome, is truly disturbing.
And here's where it gets not just interesting, but brutally heartbreaking and a poignant twist of fate.
Yeah.
In the ultimate act of betrayal, police, continuing their undercover surveillance, followed Kristi and Robert into the bushland.
Oh, wow.
What they didn't know was that by doing so, they were unknowingly being led directly to Kiesha's shallow grave.
They led them right to her.
They led them right to her. It was a harrowing discovery made on what would have been Kiesha's 7th birthday.
Oh, that's just heartbreaking. On her birthday.
Imagine that moment for the investigators, finally unearthing the horrific truth on such a profoundly poignant day, bringing a tragic closure to a months-long nightmare.
And the evidence collected was absolutely damning, painting an undeniable picture of their horrific actions. Investigators meticulously found droplets of Kiesha's blood in several areas of their unit, including the play area, linen closet, and the entrance to her bedroom.
So physical evidence was everywhere.
Everywhere. The initial forensic examination found conspicuous blood throughout the unit, and perhaps most horrifyingly, teeth marks were noted on Kiesha's bed frame.
Teeth marks on her bed frame.
Yes. Police collected 20 bags of evidence, including a vacuum cleaner and their computer, constructing a comprehensive, undeniable picture of foul play and brutal violence within that home.
The police also conducted crucial behavioral analysis, observing Kristi as aggravated and aggressive, constantly defensive during interviews.
Trying to control the narrative.
Exactly. While Robert remained quiet and unrevealing, showing little emotion. This behavioral insight, combined with the irrefutable hard evidence, solidified their suspicions, leading to the official ruling of a homicide investigation. It's a profound testament to the police's relentless pursuit of the truth, even when faced with such calculated lies, elaborate deceit, and depraved cover-ups from the very people who should have loved and protected Kiesha.
It really is.
What's truly infuriating, beyond the heinous crime itself, is to learn that Kiesha's short, tragic life was plagued by documented abuse at her mother's hands long before that final fatal blow.
This wasn't out of the blue.
Not at all. This wasn't some sudden, isolated incident, a tragic accident. It was a horrifying pattern, a cycle of cruelty that our systems, time and time again, failed to identify, failed to intervene in, and ultimately failed to break.
Which absolutely raises an important and infuriating question about early intervention, doesn't it? When Kiesha was just 15 months old, Kristi was actually convicted of biting her on the shoulder.
Biting her own baby.
Yes. Her chilling explanation to police, a direct quote, "She bit me, so I bit her back."
That's not a human response.
It's unbelievable. Kiesha was removed from Kristi's care and placed with her father and grandmother. Kristi was even forced to attend mandatory anger management counseling, but then, infuriatingly, and despite these glaring red flags,
Yeah, that gave her back.
Kiesha was returned to her mother in December 2006. The warning signs were screaming, the system had seen them, and yet it returned her to the very source of that violence. It's a systemic failure that just defies belief.
And it only escalated, becoming more horrific. In November 2007, when Kiesha was just 3 years old, a social worker noted a bruise on her face. Even more horrifying, Kiesha herself, in a direct, gut-wrenching revelation to the caseworker, stated Mom did that when asked about a cigarette burn on her body.
A 3-year-old saying that. Oh,
A cigarette burn inflicted by her own mother. And the outrage here, the official response was no further action was taken.
no further action after a documented conviction, and now this.
No further action. How many undeniable chances did this system give these monstrous individuals to continue their pattern of abuse before it became fatal? It's an absolute travesty, a betrayal of the most vulnerable.
And this points to a deeper, more insidious issue that permeated Kristi Abrahams' behavior. She harbored a deep pathological resentment towards Kiesha.
Why?
The sources indicate this was particularly because the child bore a striking physical resemblance to her biological father.
So she took it out on the child.
This resentment frequently and tragically triggered the abuse. It wasn't about discipline or control in a conventional sense. It was about an adult's pathological hatred, a complete absence of maternal affection projected onto an innocent, vulnerable child.
It's just evil.
Neighbors and family friends even reported observing Kiesha flinch, even when Kristi simply raised her hand in casual conversation, a heartbreaking indicator that the child lived in constant, palpable fear of her own mother, a fear that must have defined her short life.
Living in fear every single day. And it gets even more sickening, if that's even possible. Kristi had even made explicit threats to her own father.
Threatening her own child.
Yes, stating she would hurt her or kill Kiesha, complaining vehemently about toilet training issues and her playing up at school. She explicitly said, and I quote, "I can't handle this kid anymore."
She actually said that to her father.
Yes. This wasn't a hidden secret. These disturbing threats were voiced openly and repeatedly, and yet the child remained unprotected. It is an absolute travesty of justice, a profound failure to safeguard an innocent life.
And this tragic case, like far too many others, truly highlights egregious systemic failures and profoundly overlooked warning signs that just scream for immediate and comprehensive reform. Kiesha's school attendance, for instance.
Oh, tell me about that.
It was shocking. She attended only 4 days in 2 terms.
4 days.
4 days. Truant officers visited the family home 7 times, often finding no answer, unable to gain access. Teachers had even reported seeing bruises on Kiesha when she did manage to attend. The Department of Education was preparing legal action, but by then,
Too little, too late.
tragically, too little, too late, the system was moving, but far too slowly to save her.
And the concerns didn't stop with Kiesha. There were immediate, alarming red flags about her younger sister, whose name we are intentionally not using to protect her privacy.
Right, there were other children.
Kiesha's grandmother reported this younger sibling was not eating, and police observed a possible developmental delay. This wasn't just about Kiesha. It was about a deeply disturbing pattern of neglect impacting other innocent children in the household, screaming for urgent intervention.
And yet,
It's absolutely maddening that after Kiesha was reported missing, Kristi and Robert were even allowed to leave Sydney with their other 2 children, given the history of abuse and neglect. How does that happen?
it's a question many people ask. What's also deeply disturbing and critically important to note here is the connection to the suspicious death of Kristi's first child, Aiden.
Her first child also died.
Yes, he died at 6 weeks old from SIDS, or sudden infant death syndrome, back in 2002. While classified as SIDS, it's explicitly noted in the sources that it's almost impossible to differentiate between suffocation and SIDS in a baby under 6 months.
Oh, God.
Kristi was found hysterical, but chillingly, she never shed a tear for Aiden.
Never shed a tear.
Kiesha's grandmother found this unsettling behavior disturbingly similar to Kristi's later behavior after Kiesha was reported missing. The unclear outcome of Aiden's postmortem only adds to the profound layers of suspicion surrounding Kristi's capacity for parental care, or rather, the complete lack thereof. It's a pattern that was tragically missed.
A pattern that screams foul play, or the very least, a profound neglect. This tragic cascade of events raises an absolutely vital question about broader child protection limitations, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The sources indicate that before 2006, the majority of children killed as a result of abuse or neglect were known to state agencies at the time of their death.
The system knew about them.
Often, yes. Then, child protection laws in New South Wales were actually amended, specifically the Children and Young Persons Care and Protection Act, 1998. They raised the threshold for intervention to significant harm, meaning grave and serious harm.
So they made it harder to intervene.
Effectively, yes. While this legislative change was ostensibly meant to streamline resources and focus on the most severe cases, It inadvertently created a critical loophole, allowing children like Kiesha, whose abuse might not meet that new, higher threshold, to fall through the cracks.
That's unbelievable.
Precisely. This policy shift created a physical and emotional distance between caseworkers and vulnerable families, leading to an over-reliance on secondary reports rather than direct proactive engagement. Caseworkers simply aren't physically present daily in these homes, making it incredibly difficult to make holistic, accurate assessments of a child's safety.
Yeah. Parents could just block them.
And parents like Kristi could simply refuse cooperation, denying access to their children and effectively stonewalling the system. This isn't child protection, it's a bureaucratic nightmare, a policy failing that tragically, infuriatingly failed Kiesha, and one can only assume countless others to the most devastating extent imaginable.
It's sickening. The profound failings of these monstrous parents were mirrored, sickeningly, in the failings of the very system meant to protect the most vulnerable.
Exactly.
The topic of justice in this case, for 6-year-old Kiesha Whitebird, is truly contentious, leaving so many feeling that true accountability, that genuine justice, was never fully served. Let's talk about the convictions and what many in the community would see as shockingly lenient sentences handed down to Kiesha Abrahams and Robert Smith for their monstrous, unforgivable roles in Kiesha's death and her subsequent erasure. It truly feels like an appalling slap in the face to Kiesha's memory and her grieving family.
It really does. Kristi Abrahams, the biological mother, was ultimately convicted of Kiesha's murder. She received a minimum of 16 years with a maximum of 22 years in jail.
16 years minimum for murdering your child and burning the body.
And Robert Smith, her partner, pleaded guilty to 2 crucial charges: manslaughter by gross criminal negligence and being an accessory after the fact to Kiesha's murder. Both played undeniably culpable roles in this tragedy.
Let's really unpack Robert Smith's culpability, because his actions, even if he wasn't the direct cause of Kiesha's initial injury, are utterly repugnant and speak to a chilling lack of humanity.
Absolutely. His charge of manslaughter by gross criminal negligence stemmed directly from his horrifying, deliberate failure to seek any medical treatment for Kiesha.
He just left her.
He admitted hearing a loud bang from Kiesha's bedroom and finding her unconscious in a comatose state. Instead of immediately calling for help for this dying 6-year-old child, this individual, this man, made the reprehensible choice to go to bed and then to work the next morning.
He went to work while a child lay dying.
He chose his comfort and his job over the life of a child. Justice Megan Latham, who presided over his sentencing, described this as a complete disregard for Kiesha's welfare, categorizing it as gross criminal negligence of a very high order.
You think?
She powerfully emphasized that finding an unconscious 6-year-old would move anyone but the most callous and unfeeling of adults to seek immediate medical help. His inaction was not an oversight. It was a conscious, deliberate choice to abandon a dying child to her fate. That level of cold indifference is truly breathtaking.
And then there's his equally abhorrent role as an accessory after the fact. This is where his active, monstrous participation in the truly depraved cover-up comes into excruciating detail.
He wasn't just passive.
Not at all. After Kiesha tragically died overnight, he helped Kristi put her tiny body into a suitcase where it remained hidden for days. Then, 5 days after her death, he actively went with Kristi to the bushland burial site in Shelby. Smith himself meticulously dug a shallow grave, poured petrol over Kiesha's body, and burned it, deliberately trying to destroy all evidence.
Burning a child's body?
He burned the suitcase a short distance away and destroyed other evidence like clothes, shoes, and mobile phone SIM cards, even discarding the hammer he used to dig the grave. This wasn't passive. This was an active, calculated, monstrous participation in erasing a child, in annihilating any trace of their horrific crime.
Justice Latham found this conduct to be determined and sustained, specifically designed to destroy evidence and prevent proving the cause of death. Crucially, she noted that the objective gravity of his accessory offense was, in fact, greater than that of his manslaughter offense.
So the cover-up was seen as worse than the negligence that led to her death.
In terms of objective gravity, yes. That highlights the calculated and intentional nature of his efforts to conceal their crime, demonstrating a profound moral bankruptcy. However, it is important to acknowledge the mitigating factors considered for Smith in the legal process.
Mitigating factors.
Legally, yes. His defense argued he was a passive man who was physically and verbally abused by Kristi, leading to helplessness and high levels of anxiety. His positive behavior in custody, completion of educational programs, and expressed remorse were also considered by the court in determining his sentence.
But for so many, it's an absolute outrage that any mitigating factors could possibly overshadow the sheer horror of what Kiesha endured and what these two individuals did to her.
Understandably, the public's outcry was massive, with gut-wrenching cries of rotten hell heard clearly in court. The sentences, in the eyes of the community, felt like a shockingly lenient slap in the face to Kiesha's memory, an inadequate reflection of the monstrous crimes committed.
You can absolutely see why people felt that way.
And the presiding judge, Justice Harrison, made a chilling and profoundly impactful statement. Kiesha's death was a foreseeable and preventable consequence of equally foreseeable and preventable causes, and that Kristi's failings are mirrored in the feelings of others.
Wow. A direct shot at the system.
It was a damning indictment of systemic failures, not just individual culpability. The public sentiment, the cries of outrage, are a testament to the unshakable belief that true justice for Kiesha was never fully served. It exposes the deep, unsettling chasm between legal process, which operates within strict guidelines, and raw human compassion and the community's profound sense of moral justice.
And the infuriating saga of Robert Smith's parole is just another chapter in this heartbreaking story that continues to haunt the community. This man who helped burn and bury a 6-year-old child became eligible for parole on April 24th, 2023.
So, quite recently.
Yes, and the State Parole Authority of NSW, the SPA, actually formed an initial intention to grant parole back in February 2022 based on reports from the Serious Offenders Review Council and Community Corrections. The system was already preparing for his release long before his eligibility date.
That seems incredibly fast, given the crime.
It does. The process involved a public hearing on April 4, 2023, where submissions from Kiesha's family and the state government were meticulously considered. It's important to note that the registered victim's family, in a truly heartbreaking decision, chose not to make direct submissions.
Which speaks volumes about the emotional toll.
Absolutely. However, they did request crucial specific geographical restrictions on Smith's movement, prohibiting him from entering the Blacktown and Penrith local government areas.
Trying to create some safe distance.
Which is completely understandable. It speaks volumes about their ongoing fear, their need for their own safety, and a desperate desire for some peace of mind after enduring such an unimaginable tragedy.
So he was released on parole.
Yes, but with conditions, of course. Stringent conditions were imposed. Ongoing supervision, reporting requirements, allowing home visits, notifying changes of address or employment, and absolutely no leaving New South Wales or Australia without explicit permission.
And importantly, no contact.
Critically, no contact whatsoever with Kiesha's family or his co-offender, Kristi Abrahams. He also has to comply with Child Protection Register requirements and cannot frequent or visit the Blacktown or Penrith local government areas. It's some solace that boundaries are set, but for so many, it is cold, cold comfort given the severity of his crimes.
So what was the SPA's reasoning for granting parole? How did they justify it?
Their rationale was that release, paradoxically, was in the interest of the safety of the community.
How does that work?
Their reasoning highlighted the proposed supervision plan, which included psychological and general practitioner referrals and rehabilitation programs. They believe these measures can properly address and mitigate the risk of reoffending. Smith's criminal history before this horrific crime was largely minor, mostly property and driving offenses, with one completed parole for grievous bodily harm in 2002.
So they focused on his prior record and the plan for release.
Essentially, yes. They argue that this relatively clean record before this, combined with his time in custody, makes him a candidate for supervised release.
And what about his behavior inside?
And the nerve of it all. The Serious Offenders Review Council actually supported his release, citing Smith's completion of therapeutic programs, no serious mental health issues, and only 2 institutional infringements in 12 years, the last nearly 5 years ago, plus positive work reports in custody.
So he was a model prisoner, basically.
So by the metrics of the correctional system, he had a positive experience in prison. The system seemingly worked for him, while a child's life was brutally extinguished. This stark contrast between the internal assessment of his rehabilitation and the sheer horror of his actions is absolutely infuriating.
It really is. This raises a profound and persistent question for you, the listener, and for all of us. Was true justice ever truly served for Kiesha, given the overwhelming public sentiment and the monstrous nature of the crimes committed and concealed?
Hmm.
The SBA's ultimate argument for granting parole was that supervised release over 4 years is more conducive to maintaining community safety than release with a shorter period of parole or release at the expiration of his sentence in 4 years' time.
So better to release him supervised now than unsupervised later.
That's their arguments. Their point being that an unsupervised release later would leave him with no plan, no parole supervision, and no opportunity to engage with support services. It's a legal and systemic calculation, but it clashes profoundly with the public's moral compass.
His passage through the system in many ways appears to have been remarkably smooth, at least from the perspective of the parole board. Contrast that with Ian Huntley, the British school caretaker we mentioned earlier.
Right, who reportedly had a very rough time.
Exactly. Robert Smith, however, seemingly glided through. The discrepancy here, the chasm between legal process and public sentiment, is absolutely infuriating. It leaves you with this burning, agonizing question. How can we as a society truly find justice for a child whose life was stolen by such depraved acts and whose perpetrators receive what, to many, feels like such inadequate sentences?
It's a question with no easy answers.
Let's shift focus slightly to the tragic backdrop to Kiesha's story, the community that became the unwitting stage for such profound horror, Mount Druitt itself. This is a large urban area located in western Sydney, historically known as a disadvantaged suburb battling entrenched hardship. It's a complex area, battling not only the lingering effects of crime, but also significant and often unfair media stigmatization.
And what's absolutely crucial here is to understand the historical context and the societal canvas on which this tragedy unfolded. Mount Druitt was originally developed by the NSW state government in the 1960s and 70s as a very large public housing estate designed to accommodate approximately 8,000 homes.
Wow, that's huge.
It was. While that number has decreased over time, a significant ongoing concern is the spatial concentration of the remaining 4,700 social housing properties, particularly in specific subareas like Emerton. This concentration of public housing can often lead to a concentration of social challenges.
And this concentration, coupled with other factors, naturally leads to a higher proportion of disadvantaged people residing there. The characteristics, as outlined in our sources, are stark and challenging. Low income and employment rates, often poor educational outcomes, a higher incidence of non-age-related disability, poor English proficiency among some residents, and disproportionately high numbers of separated or divorced residents.
It's a snapshot of a community grappling with multiple, deeply interconnected socioeconomic challenges, creating vulnerabilities that are difficult to address.
Indeed. And these challenges manifest in various ways, influencing the social landscape. The sources note a relatively high incidence of crime and antisocial behavior, a pattern often linked to public housing dynamics, and unfortunately to issues like alcohol and drug abuse within segments of the community.
There's even a belief among some interviewees, reported directly in the sources, that an influx of certain ethnic groups with a higher cultural tolerance for domestic violence may have contributed to certain problems.
Okay, but that means careful handling.
Absolutely. It's crucial to state that this is a reported viewpoint within the source material, reflecting perceptions within the community, and not an endorsed statement by us. The police, however, emphasize that the vast majority of residents in public housing are law-abiding, with problems stemming from a small, problematic minority. This nuance is important for avoiding generalizations.
Very important.
Yeah.
What's truly fascinating, but also profoundly problematic in hindsight, is Mount Druitt's urban design legacy. Parts of the area adopted what's known as the Radburn model urban design.
Ah, yes, the Radburn design, separating cars and people.
Exactly. This was an architectural philosophy intended to separate pedestrian and vehicular traffic and featured back-to-front dwelling orientation, where main entrances faced communal pathways rather than streets. This design, originally intended for safety and community interaction, ironically created chronic problems related to safety and crime prevention.
Yep.
It led to insecure walkways and road underpasses that tragically became magnets for antisocial and criminal behavior due to their secluded nature. An urban planning decision made decades ago, still profoundly impacting the safety and vulnerability of residents today.
It just illustrates how even well-intentioned planning can have devastating unforeseen consequences for a community.
It really does. And its geographical location further compounds these socioeconomic issues. Mount Druitt lies on the remote western fringe of Sydney, approximately 45 kilometers from the city's central business district.
That's a long commute.
A very long commute. This remoteness results in what's known as transport poverty, where residents face long, costly, and often inconvenient commutes to jobs that are largely concentrated in the city center or other distant economic hubs. Limited bus service hours are also problematic for shift workers who rely heavily on public transport, further isolating residents from economic opportunity.
And the housing market dynamics also play a significant and complex role in shaping the community. Mount Druitt's relative affordability has, ironically and tragically, attracted people with issues, individuals facing significant personal or social challenges who can only afford housing in these areas. There's also been a disproportionate growth of private rental housing due to investor interest, raising concerns about social sifting.
Social sifting, what's that?
This refers to a phenomenon where more mobile, socioeconomically stable residents leave for more affluent areas, potentially concentrating disadvantage even further in places like Mount Druitt. It's a vicious cycle that entrenches hardship.
Yet amidst these significant, well-documented challenges, there's a powerful and deeply moving paradox. The profound sense of local pride and resilience that exists alongside the stigma.
That's really important to highlight.
It is. Mount Druitt has been subjected to relentless media stigmatization, often exaggerating lawlessness and focusing disproportionately on crime. Kiesha's case, sadly, became a vehicle for concerns over the social failings of Sydney's poorer communities, reinforcing damaging stereotypes about class and parental neglect, unfairly painting an entire community with a broad negative brush.
But the community itself tells a remarkably different and far more nuanced story. The sources highlight a strong allegiance to the area and pride in the community among the residents who call Mount Druitt home.
Yeah. What did the surveys show?
Survey results show high percentages of residents feeling they belong to their local neighborhood, and perhaps surprisingly to outsiders, felt safe there. They frequently expressed that they could count on their neighbors for help.
That's incredible resilience.
It really is. Phrases like sense of belonging, local pride, and strong social capital were recurrent themes in interviews, even in the face of persistent external negative portrayals. The community even rallied round in a powerful public response to Kiesha's death, showing a deep collective grief and a willingness to come together. This contradicts the external narrative of a fractured, lawless place.
So what's being done to address these complex issues? Are there programs in place?
Yes. Numerous place-focused initiatives, or PFIs, these are programs specifically designed for targeted areas, have been implemented to address this entrenched disadvantage. These initiatives, funded by various government and NGO bodies, include efforts like public housing deconcentration, significant investment in community facilities such as the Emerton Leisure Center, crucial literacy and employability programs, and various crime prevention initiatives like PMDAN, Project Interagency Mount Druitt Against Neglect. There have also been vital community leadership projects aimed at building local capacity and empowering residents.
Okay, so there are efforts being made. But how are they received by the community?
Well, there's a strong and understandable thread of cynicism among residents towards short-term, fleeting government programs.
Yeah, you can imagine why.
They often view them with reluctance, having seen many come and go without lasting impact, and they express a clear preference for long-term commitments. The most effective programs, according to the sources, were those that genuinely built leadership capacity within the community and had a sustained commitment, not just quick fixes.
It's a clear call for more meaningful long-term investment and less fleeting bureaucratic intervention that doesn't fully understand the deeply rooted issues.
Exactly.
Kiesha Abraham's story, the tragic account of a child murdered and then callously disposed of by her own parents, Kristi Abrahams and Robert Smith, stands as a searing reminder of the chilling capacity for deception and the profound evil that can exist within seemingly ordinary individuals. Their public charade of grief, their desperate pleas for a missing child they'd already destroyed, echoes the repugnant patterns seen in other notorious cases we discussed, like Stephen McDaniel, Gerard Baden-Clay, and Chris Watts. The ability to present a facade of normalcy while harboring unimaginable cruelty, while committing the most profound betrayal of parental trust, is a truly sickening aspect of these crimes.
It's a testament to how profoundly distorted a human being can become. And just as critical and equally infuriating is the persistent theme of systemic failures that allowed this tragedy to unfold. Kiesha's case, like far too many others, highlights in the most devastating way how children who were demonstrably known to state agencies still tragically fall through the cracks. The evolving policy thresholds for intervention, the physical and emotional distance of caseworkers from vulnerable families, and the pervasive resource limitations all contributed to a system that failed Kiesha at every critical juncture.
Every single red flag was missed, or ignored, or just inadequately dealt with.
Her documented history of abuse, from an infant biting violence, were all screaming red flags that were, in the most devastating way imaginable, either missed, dismissed, or inadequately addressed by the very institutions sworn to protect her.
The community of Mount Druitt, the tragic canvas for this horrific crime, is itself a complex entity, battling entrenched disadvantage and relentless stigma, yet simultaneously displaying profound resilience and pride.
That resilience is key.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
While we must be unequivocally clear that these societal conditions did not cause this monstrous crime, the blame rests squarely and solely with Kristi Abrahams and Robert Smith.
Yes, individual responsibility is paramount.
These conditions certainly created a context where vulnerabilities were exacerbated and where the cracks in the system became gaping chasms for a child like Kiesha to fall through unseen. It makes you furious that such a loving, resilient community has to bear witness to such depravity from within its own boundaries and then be unfairly judged for it.
Kiesha's story, therefore, is not just a singular tragic incident. It is, quite frankly, a visceral scream for reform that demands both profound individual accountability for her horrific actions and deep collective societal responsibility for the systems we put in place to protect the vulnerable. It's a stark, undeniable reminder that true justice extends far beyond courtrooms and parole hearings. It necessitates continuous vigilance, profound empathy, and an unwavering collective commitment from every one of us to protecting the most vulnerable in our communities. We must learn from the agonizing lessons of Kiesha's short life.
So what role do you play in fostering communities where every child is seen, heard, and truly protected? And what can we collectively learn from the horrifying gaps in communication, the missed opportunities for intervention, and the failures of care that Kiesha's case so tragically, so infuriatingly exposed? The silence of her cries should echo in our collective conscience, demanding that we never again allow such blatant failures, such profound betrayals, to define the fate of an innocent child.